All right, let's go ahead and take a look at your next lesson, which is solving one-step and two-step inequalities. Heading up to your learning goals, we are going to focus now on learning goal 35. I'll be able to solve, graph, and check one-step inequalities, as well as 36, doing the same thing with two-step inequalities. And actually, I'm sort of going to combine these two lessons, just because if you can handle two-step, then you can handle one-step. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here. And you can fill that into your table of contents as well. Solving one-step inequalities. A couple things here. We're going to go ahead and do a little bit of exploration here with inequalities to learn a very specific rule to solving inequalities. So let's go ahead and get started with this. Follow along. I'll move a little quickly, but you can pause if you need. All right, so a couple things. Right away, when we look at these inequalities, what I want you to do is let's go ahead and add 5 to both sides. We know that if we do the same thing to both sides in equations and inequalities both, that they will still be true, or if it's an equation, equivalent. And so we can see that we end up with 10 is less than 15. And this is still true. Okay, let's go ahead and try subtraction and just see what's happened. So let's subtract 5 to both sides. And you can see we get 0 is less than 5, which is still true. Okay, so nothing different with adding or subtracting. Okay, let's go ahead and try multiplying instead. So we'll multiply by 5 and multiply by 5, okay, to both sides. We end up with 25 is less than 50. And so this is still true. So at this point, adding, subtracting, multiplying, even if we divided by 5, both sides, so you can see this here, I would have ended up getting what? 1 is less than 2, okay, which is still true. Okay, so I just wanted you to be able to see that one as well. All right, now here's what I want you to notice. If I multiply or divide a negative, let's watch what happens. So with our first one here, let's go ahead and multiply by a negative 5 to both sides. Okay? When we do that, we end up with negative 25 is less than negative 50. And so I want you to think about that as temperature. Is negative 25 degrees actually less than negative 50 degrees? And the answer is no. And so the first thing that you have to realize is this very first rule, okay, is that when you multiply by a negative, because of our integer rules, you have to flip the sign. And so that's just something that you need to remember. And so to make this true, I actually have to take the sign and I need to flip it, okay? And so instead of being that way, we're going to go like this. We'll say flip and continue on, okay? And so now this is true, okay? But it was not before, okay? Let's go ahead and look at dividing by negative 5. So if I divide by negative 5 to both sides, I end up with 5 divided by 5 is 1, but it's negative. And you can see if I keep the less than, I end up with negative 2. And negative 1, if we're thinking temperature, is not less than negative 2. And so the same thing, because we multiplied or divided by a negative, when we do this, we're going to flip the sign. And we end up with, instead of less than, greater than. Okay? And this is what makes that true. And so that's the big rule. Let's go ahead and make this stand out. You can do these little wavy things to realize that this is something special. When you, and we're going to go ahead and fill this in right here, okay? When you multiply or divide both sides of the inequality by a negative number, okay, flip the symbol. Okay, so you have to flip the symbol because of the way our integer rules work. When you do that operation, we will always flip the symbol. And so just remember, that's only multiply or divide. So I have a song for you to check out to drill into your head a little bit. So take a look.
When you multiply or divide by a negative, you must change the sign. When you multiply or divide by a negative, you must change the sign. You must change the sign. You must change the sign.
All right, when you multiply or divide. So there you have another song for you. All right, let's go ahead and move on now. And we're going to test out a couple other things here. So again, we're remembering adding, subtracting, multiplying or dividing is fine. But if we're multiplying or dividing a negative by a negative, you must change the sign. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at these. I just want you to look at the problem and decide if you're going to have to flip the sign or not. And so we know that we would subtract 1 to both sides, and then we would get our m equals. It is okay to add and subtract, just not multiply, divide by negative numbers. So we're not going to need to flip the sign. Let's look at this next one, number 2. Okay, how do I get rid of a divide by negative 2? I have to multiply by a negative number. Anytime I have to multiply by a negative, I have to flip the sign. Remember, when you multiply or divide by a negative, you must change the sign. So I do have to flip for this one. Okay, let's test out our rule again. I have a 3 times k. To get rid of the 3, we're going to divide by 3. I'm not multiplying or divided by a negative, so I am okay. So I do not need to flip the sign. All right, now, another portion that we need to be aware of is sometimes you're going to be asked to check if an inequality is true or not. It's sort of like evaluating the expressions that we've done in the past. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. It's a very, very similar process. Someone decided that m is greater than or equal to negative 3. And so let's go ahead and graph it, and then we'll just check and see if that's true. So remember our steps for graphing. We write the target number or the focus number, which is negative 3. Draw your line. Write your 3 ticks, 1, 2, 3. Put one bigger number, one smaller. It's negative though, so bigger is a negative 2, smaller is a negative 4. Look and see if there's concrete. Okay, and there is concrete, so we're going to fill in. I'm going to change my color. Fill in the point at negative 3 and read from the variable. It says m is greater than, so we're sending our infinite ray this direction. And so this is what that inequality says. Let's go ahead and see if this is actually true. If we put in something for m. So m is anything greater than negative 3. One of the tips that they say up here, or suggestion, is that when you're checking an inequality, don't use that like target number. Okay, pick something so that we can really see, is it true on the arrow direction, because it may be true that negative 3 works, but maybe the arrow's in the wrong direction. So you always want to check something that's within the arrow. And so let's go ahead and just use negative 2 because we're saying that m is something greater than negative 3. Let's go ahead and pick negative 2. So I'm going to put negative 2 plus 1, and we're checking to see if it is greater than or equal to negative 2. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. And negative 1 is greater than or warmer than negative 2, so this checks out as true. All right, let's take a look at this next problem. And here we go. All right, So someone is saying that x is greater than 2. We'll see if that's accurate. So we're just plugging the 2 in and solving what is on that left side of the inequality. So let's go ahead and graph it first. So we're going to write your focus number, draw your line, put your 3 tick marks, write one number bigger, which is 3, one number smaller, which will be 1, and then let's identify if it is equal to. If it has cement, it does not, so it's going to be an open circle. I'm going to change colors. So I have an open circle around that number 2 tick mark, and then we need to go back up to the variable and read it from there, left to right. X is greater than, which means we're sending our arrow to the right for greater than. Okay. All right, now that we've done that, let's go ahead and check, and we're going to actually substitute a number in. So I'm going to go do a different color now, and we'll test this out. So they're saying x is anything greater than 2. So let's go ahead. Remember, we're not going to pick the target number, pick something within the line. So we'll go ahead and just pick, let's see, I don't want to pick 3 just because I'm looking at this divided by a -2. I want to pick something easy. So something else bigger. Let's just go ahead and pick 4 instead. So we know 4 is up here in the number line, so that'll work. All right, I'm going to plug in 4 for x. Okay, and we're just solving this side. So 4 divided by -2. I don't have to flip the sign because I'm not dividing a -2 to both sides. That only happens when you're doing it to both sides. So 4 divided by a -2 is a -2, and -2 is not greater than 4. And so whatever this person did, they did it wrong. If we do want to look up real quick, just to take a peek at what they did wrong, let's see, we would have multiplied both sides by -2. And when you multiply both sides by -2, multiplying or dividing by a negative flips the sign. We would have had x is less than -8 would have been the correct answer. Okay, so we just really quickly were able to prove that what they did wrong. We're going to go ahead and skip number 6 and also 7, 8, 9 because we're going to be doing a lot of checking in the 2-step inequalities. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, we're going to jump right into solving 2-step inequalities. So here we go. You do have to solve for the variable or isolate the variable, graph it, and check and make sure it works. And we'll talk about how to set that up. So here we go. Let's just solve for n like you normally would. Pretend it's an equation. You just have to remember your rules about multiplying or dividing by a negative. Okay. All right. So here we go. Let's go ahead and solve this out. We have a division and then we have addition. We know that to solve for a variable, we are going to do backwards order of operations. So we're subtracting 5 from both sides. That creates a 0 pair, and so we have n over 3 is less than or equal to -9. Okay. Now we are going to multiply by 3 both sides, and we end up with n is less than or equal to -27. Okay. All right, now let's go ahead and graph this specific inequality. So we're going to write our target number of -27. Draw your line, put your 3 tick marks, write one bigger number, which is -26, and -28 is a smaller number. Okay, think temperature. Now let's go ahead and look and see if we have concrete. I'm going to change colors. I do have concrete, so I'm going to have a solid point. Okay, and then just read the variable. So I have n is less than. And so less than always is going to go to the left. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my arrow here. Okay, and I have my graph done. Now, I need to do a check, so I need to pick a number. We already talked about that we're not ever going to pick the target number as our possible number. We're always going to pick something else. But I also want to be thinking, I'm going to be plugging something in for n over here. I want it to work nice for me. I don't want to have like some pain in the butt problem. So I'm going to be dividing by 3. So let's just pick something that'll work really nice. So I don't want to pick 28 and have to do 28 divided by 3. So I might as well pick like negative 30 because that's still on this line. It's just further down over here. So I think I'm going to pick that for my check just to make things nicer. So let's go ahead and copy our black over to here. So let me go ahead and change to black. So we'll have negative 30 over 3 plus 5 is less than or equal to negative 4. Okay, we'll go ahead and solve this out. Now we're doing order of operations. So I do negative 30 divided by 30, or divided by 3, and we get negative 10 plus 5 is less than or equal to negative 4. Negative 10 plus 5 is negative 5 is less than or equal to negative 4, and this is true. Okay, so we're good. All right, let's move on to your next one. Let me get to a color here. All right, we're solving for x, backwards PEMDAS. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. Subtracting a negative is okay. Just multiplying and dividing a negative, we need to flip the sign. We create a 0 pair, so we're left with negative 4.4x is greater than 8.6 minus 2 is 6.6. And then now we have a times negative 4.4. I change colors. We can divide by negative 4.4. Now notice we're dividing by a negative. You have to listen to those words. Okay, so instantly right away I'm going to flip my sign so I don't forget. Okay, so that's where we have that flip here. Okay, all right, and so we create a 0 pair and we have x equals 6.6 divided by negative 4.4 is negative 1.5. And we flipped the sign. All right, let's go ahead and graph this now. So we look at our target number. We're graphing this inequality. My target number is negative 1.5. I draw my line, put my 3 tick marks, and put one number bigger. Okay, so let's do a warmer temperature. Let's just do negative 1, and let's do negative 2. Okay, all right. Look and see if we have concrete or not. I do not, so it's an open circle. And then I'm going to reread this over here. So it says x is less than, which means that I am going to the left. And I really want to shade this in well to make it stand out. All right, we need to check. So we need to check something that is within the error. Remember, we're not choosing the target number, okay, when we're checking, because we want to see, does it fall correctly on our arrow there. All right, so let's go ahead and just pick negative 2. That seems like an easy number to choose from. So we're going to rewrite our problem. So we have a negative 4.4 times negative 2 plus 2 is greater than 8.6, we hope. All right, order of operations says I do multiplication first. And so negative times a negative, I have a positive 8.8 plus 2 is greater than 8.6. And 10.8 is definitely greater than 8.6. So this is true. Okay, so we did good. All right, let's move on to number 3. Okay, we're isolating the variable. So solving for x, I noticed some negatives, so sort of red flag here. Remember, we have our parentheses here technically, so we have to get rid of that divided by negative 2 before we can tackle the numerator. So we're going to multiply negative 2 over 1, okay, or multiply a negative 2 to both sides. When I multiply a negative, we know that we have to flip our sign. Okay, so right away, instead of greater than, I'm going to make less than or equal to. Okay, so you can see my little notes I'm doing. These create one whole, so that cancels out, and we're left with negative 2 times negative 50 is 100. And so we have 100, negative times a negative. x minus 5 on that side. We need to add 5 to both sides, okay, which doesn't affect our inequality sign. And we have 105 is less than or equal to x. Okay, so here's our inequality that we're graphing. Let's go ahead and write our target number of 105. Draw our line. You can see same process every time. Put our 3 tick marks. One number higher would be 106. One number smaller would be 104. Look and see if there's any concrete. Okay, I do have concrete, so this is a solid point. So I'll make my solid point here, and then go back and read from the variable. So this time I'm going to go from right to left, and I have x is greater than or equal to. So greater than means going to the right. Okay. So we always remember, we always just read from the variable, and it'll be right every time. All right, so now that I have my graph, I'm going to test it out, okay? And so I need to pick a number that is greater than 105 somewhere on the line. So let's just pick something that'll be nice. I'm going to look over at my problem. I'm going to have, if I put something in here, I'll be subtracting 5, but then I'll have to divide by 2. So maybe I'll pick like 100. I don't want to do 100 because then I'll have like 95 divided by, so maybe I'll pick 105. So let's do 105 instead. Oh, I don't want to do 105 because that's the target number. So let's go ahead and do 110 as our number. So I'm going to go to black. I'm just trying to pick a number that like makes life nice for me. All right, a negative 50 is greater than or equal to, and I'm going to choose 110 minus 5 over negative 2. Okay, so I've copied that accurately. Let's go ahead and solve. Now we do order of operations, so I'm going to do my numerator first because it's in parentheses technically. And so we end up with 110 minus 5 is 105. And so we have 105 divided by negative 2. And I'm just copying everything down. All right, now I can do my division. And we get negative 50 is greater than or equal to 105 divided by negative 2 puts us at 52.5. And I just want to double check. It's always good to check things. 105 divided by 2, yep, 52.5. Because it was negative, positive divided by a negative is negative. All right, so now that we've done this, we can go ahead and look at what we have. A negative 50 is greater than or equal to negative 52. And so really think about that. Yep, negative 50 is bigger than negative 52. So this is true. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. We only have 2 left. Okay, solving for the variable. Okay, I see my term here, and then I see my addition. I'm doing backwards order of operations, so we're going to subtract 1/3 from both sides. And remember, subtracting is fine. It's just multiplying or dividing a negative where I have to flip the sign. So I don't have to do anything with this. These cancel out, and we end up with a 1/2 minus a 1/3. So we're going to have to change a couple things here. Let's go ahead and change the halves to 6 here. So times 2 over 2. So we end up with a 3 over 3 would be better. So we end up with a 3/6 minus a 1/3. And so let's go ahead and solve that instead. Instead of a minus a 1/3, think of it as a times 2 over 2, and we get negative 2/6. So I'm going to just make some adjustments here. So I'm just making some equivalent fractions. So we have a 3/6 minus 2/6, and that puts us at 1/6 on this side is greater than 2/3 m. Okay, now to get rid of the 2/3 and the m, it's a 2/3 times m. So I'm going to divide by 2/3 or multiply by the reciprocal. It makes those go away, and we have 1m. Okay, multiplying by a positive doesn't change the inequality sign. We have multiply by, the 3/2. We can cross simplify here. We get the 1/2. So we end up with 1/4 is greater than m, or m is less than 1/4 as our final answer. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and graph this. So we're going to record our target number, which is 1/4. Draw your line. Draw your 3 tick marks. We need to make one number bigger. So let's go ahead and do a bigger number would be 2/4, and a smaller number would be 0. Okay, so we're just going up by 1/4 and below by 1/4. Let's go ahead and look and see if there's any cement, any equal to, and there is not. So we have an open point. So we're just going to put an open circle there, and then we can go ahead and look at the variable. So again, starting at the variable, read it this way now. So m is less than. Less than means going to the left. Let me change colors here. And there's my arrow. So the the numbers are all less than negative 1/4, or just 1/4. So let's go ahead and test this out. We just need to pick something on that line. 0 is a great thing to pick. That's super nice and easy. So let's do that. So we have, doing our rewrite from over here, okay, we have 1/2 is greater than 2/3, and I'm just substituting with 0, plus 1/3. Let's go ahead and test this out. We have 1/2 is greater than 2/3 times 0 is nothing. And so we just have plus positive 1/3. Okay. And 1/2 is definitely greater than 1/3 because if something is in thirds, I know that it would have to be 1.5 over 3 to be a half. Okay. And so this is true, which means we did it correctly. All right, last one. Okay. Oh, right away I see a number on the outside and parentheses. We know what that means. So let's go ahead and distribute or simplify this side first. So realize we're doing a negative 3 times x is a negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 7, notice I'm saying it out loud so I don't mess up, is a positive 21. This is less than 41. Let's go ahead and continue to solve. We're doing backwards order of operations, so minus 21, minus 21. And that creates a 0 pair. We're left with negative 3x is less than, and we have 20. Okay. And now we're going to have to, we have a negative 3 times x, so we're going to divide by negative 3 both sides. Anytime you're multiplying or dividing by a negative both sides, we are going to flip the sign. So instead of less than, we have a greater than now, and we have an x equals 20 divided by 3. Let's see. Yep, we have a repeating decimal, so we have to just keep it at the negative 20/3. Okay. All right, so here is what x is greater than. Let's go ahead and graph it. So we put our target number first, okay, negative 20/3. And then we're going to draw our line. This is a little bit annoying because it's hard to understand what 20/3 is, so we're going to have to think about that as a mixed number here in a minute. All right, so one of the things I can do to keep this a little bit simple is if I have negative 20/3, a little bit bigger would technically be negative 19/3, and a little bit smaller would be negative 21/3. That can simplify. No, 21 divided by 3 is 7. And so I could just write negative 7 there or leave it as is. Okay, I'm just going to leave it as is for right now. Okay, all right, now look and see if we have any concrete, meaning is it greater than or equal to? It's not, so let's go ahead. We know that it's going to be an open circle. I'm going to change colors. and then go back to this variable right here and read it carefully. It says x is greater than. We know greater than goes to the right. And so I'm going to draw my arrow here to the right. And there we go. And very last step here, we need to go ahead and do the check for our last problem. I'm going to go back to black here. I need to pick something that is greater than negative 20/3. I'm just going to go straight to 0 because 0 makes life easy. So let's go ahead and do -3. We'll substitute 0 for x, -7. And then we have less than 41. I guess I could have even picked 7 and ended up with a 0. That would have been nice too. All right, so a 0 minus a 7, we'll take care of our parentheses first, is a -7 times a -3. 3 times 7 is a 21, is less than 41. This is true, and we're all set. Okay, so this is the process of solving, graphing, and checking two-step inequalities. You can see not much different than what you're normally used to. You just have to remember that one rule of when you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign.